Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in the last video we had learned unit 1 and unit 2 of standing up for yourself. In this video we are going to study unit 3 and unit 4. Now let us recap what we had studied in the last part, that is part 1. In unit 1 we had studied that the writer's parents were divorced. His father was at Kazakhstan with his new wife and their two children. His mother was giving concerts for the troops at the front. As his parents were divorced, so he was left to the street and whatever he learned from the street. In Unit 2, there was a boy of 16 years named Red. He was the ruler of the street. He was walking up and down the street careless of the people around him. He was always moving with his lieutenants. His lieutenant could stop any boy unhesitatingly and empty out his pocket. Everyone was afraid of Red, and so was the author. This is it what we had learnt in the part 1. And now let's get start our part 2, that is unit 3 and unit 4. Unit 3 Warm Up. Does the narrator have an encounter with Red? How many times did he come across Red? What was the outcome of his encounters with Red? Read the following unit of the text to find out the answers. The text: I wanted to conquer my fear of Red, so I wrote a poem about him. This was my first piece of journalism in words. By the next day, the whole street knew it by heart and exulted with triumphant hatred. So here the author is saying that he wanted to conquer. Conquer means overcome his fear of Red. Therefore, he wrote a poem about him. This was his first piece of journalism in words. Words means poetry or poem. By the next day, the whole street knew it by heart and exulted. Exulted means showed great joy and excitement with triumphant hatred. Triumphant hatred means showing great joy or satisfaction. One morning on my way to school, I suddenly came upon Red and his lieutenants. His eyes seemed to bore through me. Ah, the poet, he drawled, smiling crookedly. So you write verses, do they rhyme? One morning on his way to school, he suddenly came upon Red and his lieutenants. Then Red said the narrator, Ah, the poet, and he smiled crookedly. Crookedly means casually. Then he said, So you write verses. Then again he asked, Do they rhyme? Red's hand darted into his pocket and came out armed with its knuckle duster. It flashed like lightning and struck my head. I fell down streaming with blood and lost consciousness. This was my first remuneration as a poet. I spent several days in bed. When I went out, with my head still bandaged, I again saw Red. I struggled with myself but lost and took to my heels. At home, I rolled on my bed, biting my pillow and pounding it in shame and impotent fury at my cowardice. I made up my mind to vanquish it at whatever cost. So then Red's hand darted. Darted means to move quickly into his pocket and came out with its knuckle duster. Then it flashed like lightning and struck the narrator's head. Then the narrator fell down, streaming with blood, and lost his consciousness. Consciousness means faint. He faint or senseless. This was his first remuneration. Remuneration means salary or gift in return as a poet. The narrator spent several days in bed. When he went out with his still bandaged with his head still bandaged, he again saw Red. The author struggled with himself but lost and took to my heels means began to run. Took to my heels means began to run away. At home, he rolled on his bed, biting his pillow and pounding it. Pounding it means holding it in shame. And impotent fury means futile anger at his cowardice, lack of courage. Then he made up his mind to vanquish, means defeat completely, it at any cost. Unit 4 Warm Up. Fear of Red or his cowardice. Which was more important for the narrator to deal with? What method did the speaker choose to deal with his fear? Did he succeed in his attempt to conquer fear? Read the following unit of the text and for the answers. The text. I went into training with parallel bars and weights. After every session, I would feel my muscles, they were getting bigger, but slowly. Then I remembered something I had read in a book about a miraculous Japanese method of wrestling, which gave an advantage to the weak over the strong. I exchanged a week's ration card for a textbook on Jiu-Jitsu. So the narrator went into training with parallel bars and weights. After every session, he would feel like his muscles are getting bigger, but very slowly. Then he remembered something that he had read in a book about a miraculous Japanese method. Here, miraculous means unexpected. Unexpected Japanese method of wrestling, which gave him an advantage to the weak over the strong. He exchanged a week's ration card for a textbook on Jiu-Jitsu. For 3 weeks, I stayed at home and practicing with two other boys. Then I went out. For 3 weeks, he stayed at home and practiced with two other boys. Then he went out. Red was sitting on the lawn in our yard, playing winged et un with his lieutenants. He was absorbed in the game. So once when Red was sitting in the on the lawn in his yard and was playing winged et un, which is a Russian card with his lieutenants. So Red was very much absorbed in the game. Fear was still deep in me, urging me to go back. But I went up to the players and kicked and scattered the cards. Fear was still there in narrator, which was urging. Urging means compelling or forcing him to go back. But he went up to the players and kicked and scattered the cards. Red looked up, surprised at my impudence after my recent flight. So then Red looked up and surprised at my impudence, surprised at his impudence. Impudence means angerness or rudeness after his flight, after his recent flight. Flight here means kick. He got up slowly. You, looking for more? He asked menacingly. Slowly, Red got up and asked the narrator menacingly. Menacingly means by creating fear that you looking for more. As before, his hand dived into his pocket for the knuckle duster, but I made a quick jabbing movement and Red, howling with pain, rolled on the ground, bewildered. He got up and came at me, swinging his head furiously from side to side like a maddened bull. As before, Red's hand before dived into his pocket for the knuckle duster, but the narrator made a quick jabbing movement. Jabbing movement means a sharp hand gesture, and the red rolled. And then Red rolled on the ground, howling with pain. Then he got up and came to the narrator, swinging his head furiously from side to side like a maddened bull. I caught his wrist and squeezed slowly, as I had read in the book, until the knuckle duster dropped from his limp fingers. Nursing his hand, Red fell down again. He was sobbing and smearing the tears over his pock-marked face with his grubby fist. Then the narrator caught Red's wrist and squeezed. Here, squeezed means twist. Slowly, he did it as he had read in the book, until the knuckle duster dropped down from his limp fingers. Nursing his hand, Red again fell down. He was sobbing. Sobbing means to speak while crying. He was crying and speaking. And smearing. Smearing means wiping his tears over his pock-marked face with his grubby. Grubby means dirty fist. That day, Red ceased to be the monarch of our street. So, from that day, ceased means stopped, and monarch means king. So, from that day onwards, Red stopped to be the king of the street. And from that day on, I knew for certain that one need not fear the strong. All one needs is to know the way to beat them. For every strong man, there is a special jujutsu. So, and from that day onwards, the narrator knew for certain that one need not fear the strong. All that one needs is to know the way to beat them. For every strong man, there is a special jujitsu. What I also learned on this occasion was that to be a poet, I had not only to write poems but know how to stand up for them. The narrator also learned from this occasion was that to be a poet, and he had not only to write poems but to know how to stand up for them. So this is all for today. Hope you all like this video. If you like this video, do like, share and subscribe.